All right, guys, I'm back. I'm here today to tell you guys about a bad experience I had with a bad church. I don't have time to go into every single detail about why this church and why I just feel like they're going down a wrong path. There's plenty of other videos where people dive super deep into why the church as a whole is going in a bad direction and why pastors leading there and the head pastor need to repent. That's not really my place to say. And honestly, since I'm kind of doing this myself, I'm just going to focus on the aspects of how this church wronged me, why I think it's part of a larger problem at the church. So if you guys are familiar with this channel, you know that at some point I released a series called How to Prove Stalking. It documents my life as I was being harassed by somebody who made it their sole life mission to get me in trouble at work, to get me in trouble at church, and who just kept making spam accounts to harass me and my family. If you're interested in that, please go watch that. It's a 4-part series. It's pretty good. I put a lot of work into it. Today, we're going to talk about how that person also got me in trouble at a church and ultimately fed into my decision to leave that church altogether. But the church I'm talking about today is Mercy Culture Church, the Fort Worth campus, where the head pastor and his wife are there. So I started going there back in 2020. It was very good for me. It was during COVID when churches were shut down. It's when I would also say they were at their peak attendance because that church was choosing to stay open when other churches were closing, and they were making a big stance on we're not shutting down because we're told to. It's not illegal. It's not a crime to come to church and be together. But it drew a lot of people in and got a lot of buzz, and that's kind of where they got famous and hit their sort of mega church status, even though it's not that big of a building. And I started going there in 2020. I went to a small group, and I was dating the small group leader's daughter. Pretty interesting story on its own that I might elaborate on at some point, but we'll see. That relationship fell through, and that's where I hit my lowest point in my life, and I really needed something more than what I was doing. And that's where Mercy Culture kind of shined. That's when I really got plugged in. I really started serving there. I started figuring out who I was in the Lord. And that's where just my life changed. I submitted myself completely to the Lord, the church, and just everything. And it fixed all the issues that I had. I figured out there was more to life than what I was doing, what I wanted, and what my plans were for my life. And I just had a real genuine encounter with the Lord there. And the worship was just awesome. It was just so easy to get plugged in there at the time. As time went on, I decided, hey, I like praying with people. And I like when I go to these meetings, these small group meetings, I enjoy meeting people. And when we share what's going on in our lives together, I realized I really enjoy praying with people and just, meeting the Lord where they're at and just, being vulnerable with each other and praying. And it was a stretch for me at the time because I wasn't as social as I am today. But anyway, I got on their prayer team. It took forever, by the way, to get on. It took like 7 months. You put in your application. They were backed up for months on, here's your interview. Here's where do you want to get plugged in. It took forever to get in touch with people. So I got on the waiting list, and then I was doing small groups, and I had friends there that I was also just getting close with and staying in contact with. I also found out I thought I had what it took to be a small group leader there. I got it with a buddy of mine. We started a men's group, which I have pictures of, and it was just thriving. It was awesome. People were going. They got plugged in. We would always go out and just have talks with each other, and it was just a really strong group. One of the first major problems I noticed with the church was the turnover rate. In our men's group, we got so many really cool people that would show up for 3 months, and then they would switch churches. And this happened quite a bit. A lot of people did stay, but honestly, after a year max, people came in, really got an encounter with the Lord, or so they thought, and then would just leave. We also had the same problem with pastors. So as a small group leader, we had people over us that we had to check into. That rotated so many times. I want to say at least 3 times in like 2 years that we were small group leading. We had different people over us every time. Maybe it was even per semester. It was a lot. They're supposed to check in with us and work with us and see how we're doing. That only happened one time with one guy, as opposed to like the 7 or 8 people or couples that were in charge of us as leaders and were supposed to feed into us and check in with us. We only got checked in once before the big thing that got us kind of in trouble. So there wasn't really a lot of accountability. Another thing I really didn't like about that church at the time, but it didn't cloud how I thought about the church as a whole. It was just something I didn't like, was every week there was a different set of pastors. And I don't mean like they rotated out speakers. I'm talking back to the turnover rate issue. Was there were pastors that would be like, hi, they come up on stage after worship. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm a pastor here at the church. And I'm like, who is that guy? You didn't know who your pastors were. You didn't know who to talk to. You didn't know how to do anything with communication. If you had a problem, you didn't know really who to go to. Because they rotated so much who was over us as small group leaders, and the fact that they wouldn't check back with us or check in with us to see how we're doing, we were kind of allowed to operate on our own, which was a good thing at a certain point, but also like when we had a problem, we didn't know who to turn to. The problem also being every week we just had a different pastor who we just didn't recognize, and then he'd be gone after a month or two, and they replace him. And sometimes when they call all the pastors to the front, there'd be like 12 pastors that I still didn't recognize, and then again, those would rotate out. It was really bad. The turnover rate across the board was awful. Regardless, I pressed on in the stuff that I felt like God called me to do. The men's group was still going pretty strong. The numbers were high. We had a few regulars, but again, it just kept rotating. I did get on the prayer team eventually. At the end of service, we go to the front and people come up with their prayer requests, and I sit there and pray with them. And it was going really good. I didn't seek a leadership position in that department, but I was approached by the head of the prayer team at the time, who's still a pastor there. I'm not going to say her name, but she had noticed me and invited me to some leader meetings. And I met up with other leaders who were in charge of scheduling, and they were kind of seeking me out for the next step. They had liked that I came every week, that I was a good prayer, and that I was consistent, and I showed leadership qualities. So they called me to be a leader, and I got on the leadership team there too. So now I was in charge of people that were praying. I got to listen and watch, and I got to help manage a little bit. I organized an event for the church where people were praying during an event. So I got to do some more extra responsibilities, and it was pretty cool. But let me go through some of the values here at Mercy Culture Church. There's a bunch to go through, but I'm going to go through the ones that I feel like are the most important for the story I'm about to tell you. Forgiveness is not optional. We love mercy, so we show mercy. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. There is no spiritual growth without forgiveness. Authenticity. We don't do fake. We disciple through real relationships. We create an atmosphere for people to be open and honest by leading in vulnerability and transparency. Trust. We lean into awkward. We build the trust, character, and relationships of tomorrow by engaging in the tough conversations today. Communication. Downshift. We choose to slow down and communicate clearly today so we can move forward faster tomorrow. Those are just a few. There's a bunch more. Feel free to go to the Mercy Culture website if you want to. As you know, my stalker decided she didn't like me anymore. I wasn't giving her enough attention. So she went to leadership and said, hey, he assaulted me. He ruined my life. Hey, he hurt my son. All the accusations I went over in the stalker video. And without question, the leader who put me in charge in the first place had suddenly just taken me off the schedule. Without explanation, I wasn't serving anymore. I wasn't scheduled to be serving for the next month. And she looked surprised when I showed up to the meeting. And she's like, oh, Caleb, what are you doing here? And then she asked me to leave. So I knew something was up. And that following week, she asked to meet with me in the back of the church during service. So I got asked to be pulled out of service and go to the back and talk with her. She also brought back in a guy that I really liked who led worship. I also won't say his name. They were both sitting there. They were like, hey, tell me about your podcast. And I was like, oh, we just talk about nerd stuff. We talk about this and this and that. And she said, what else do you talk about? And I was like, well, I mean, that's kind of it. Sometimes we dip into dating stuff when I'm with my friend Darcy, but, nothing crazy. And then she goes, well, I saw some clips that made me really sad. And I was like, well, hey, what? It's a fair question. Like, I'm sitting here like, what scenes are you, what are you talking about? I just started doing clips. I didn't have like footage of stuff we were talking about. They didn't have the fancy text with emojis on it, nothing like that. So I was like, hey, what are you talking about? And she didn't have an answer for me. And I kind of already knew what was going on. I kind of figured somebody had talked to her and said some crazy stuff about me. That's the impression I was getting, because there's no way she independently would have seen these clips. At the time, we had maybe 40 subscribers. There's no way my crappy shorts with bad audio showed up on her feed and she saw it and was like, wow, he needs to get out of here. Somebody had sent her very specific stuff and said, hey, he's bad. He hurt me. He assaulted me. He did all these things that weren't true. And so she couldn't tell me what clips those were. And then I even said, like, hey, do you want me to take those? I didn't know what she was talking about, but do you want me to take those clips down? Will that make this better? And she said, look, that's not up to me. That's up to you. I don't know what she's talking about. So then I try to say, okay, does somebody talk to you? Does somebody try to get me in trouble? And then she acted like she didn't know what I was talking about. So I showed her the protective order that I had, that I told you guys I filed. I showed it to her. I showed her a picture of the person on it. And I said, this person's coming at me, trying to make stuff up and state things about me. She didn't look at it. I gave her a physical copy with pictures of the order and the person in question. And she wouldn't even look at it. She said, I don't hear you taking any responsibility for this. All I hear is what she did wrong. You're putting it all on her. And I don't understand what she's talking about. I'm the victim of stalking. It's a protective order. My safety is in question. This church prides itself on justice. This church prides itself on authenticity, on trust, on communication. And she's not being honest with me about what she's getting rid of me for. Because there's no way, again, she saw my podcast and thought, wow, he's crazy. She didn't know what clips that were so bad. She didn't have anything. She wasn't telling me the truth about why they were making me step down. And she told me that. They want me to take a step back from leadership. They're going to take me off the rotation of leaders and prayer. And we're going to assign you a mentor. So the guy that was sitting there, he didn't say much. But anytime he did say something, he was basically agreeing with her. And he started going into detail about, hey, I'm getting ready to plant a church. I'm getting ready to do all this and that. So I wasn't happy with what was going on, but I was excited about actually being trained by this guy. I was like, hey, he's really good. He's a great worship leader. I actually have a lot of respect for him. He doesn't know me, but I know him. He's pretty well known around the church. So I was actually kind of excited to get into discipleship with him. I thought I could actually learn something. I was not happy about the situation, but I was super excited to be kind of partnered with him. He only called me one time, and I texted him first. I didn't wait for him because I knew they'd try to say that later, like, oh, you didn't reach out, so I thought you were ditching the church. I reached out to him. We talked one time on the phone, and he was telling me some stuff. He never met with me in person, and I tried texting him to meet him in person, and he just never did it. Communication was really bad at the church. So whatever happened with this pastor and the prayer team didn't affect our small group leading yet. That would happen later. We also, the people in charge of our small group had rotated again, and now it was a couple in charge of all the small groups, and they pulled us in for a meeting, and they asked us to go through the leadership standards, which there were 4 of them. One of them was, how do you take your Sabbath? Another one was, how are you with forgiveness? And then we finally get to the third one, which is tithing, and I was like, well, I don't tithe because of I'm reevaluating my beliefs on tithe, but I do give, and I have a set amount I give every month to missionaries and even to the church at some points during their big offering throughout the year. And immediately they said, okay, well, you're not going to be a small group leader anymore. As soon as we got to the money issue, they were saying you're not going to be small group leading anymore. So in the prayer department, they were not being honest with me about why they got rid of me. And then in the small group leading department, if you don't pay your fair share, if you don't pay your taxes at that church, then you're not going to serve there anymore. So without question, even though we had been leading small groups for about 2.5 to 3 years, just done. It was turned off. So if you don't pay your tithe, you're not allowed to serve there, essentially. You're not allowed to be in any kind of leadership role. But here's the thing. When they asked me about tithing, I said, I was honest with them about what the tithing was. It would have been so easy for me to say, yeah, I pay tithe. How are they going to check? Were they going to go back and look at everybody's tax records and be like, hey, you're lying. Where's that money? Like, no. And I was honest with them. I said, hey, I'm having questions about tithing at church. I'm not quite sure if it's actually mandatory 10% tithe, but I still give money to church. I'm not saying don't give money to church. And they didn't want to hear it. If you didn't pay your tax, you weren't allowed to serve. And they didn't give us the road to redemption. They didn't say, okay, here's we're going to check with you in 6 months to see where you're at and see. But no, they took us off of all the chats, took us off all the message boards and didn't follow up with us, didn't try to reach out. I told you guys earlier that nobody checked in with us as small group leaders for about 2.5 years. Well, the very next time they check in with us, remember the one guy at the beginning checked in with us one time. We had a good discussion, nothing for 2.5 years. And then the very next time we meet up by this couple that just got the position, you're fired. You didn't pay your tax, you're fired. And shortly after that, they weren't in charge of small groups anymore. They rotated out again. So they got the job, got rid of us as leaders, and then left to go do something else. So nobody followed up with us. Nobody cared about how we were doing and where our walk was with the Lord. They were just cut and dry, black and white. If you're not paying, you're out of here. I don't understand either. There was no in between. There was no path to redemption. There was no nothing. How about putting us on a probation and saying, hey, this is a leadership standard. This is one you have to abide by. You got a few months to fix it. And if you fix it, then you can keep leading. Nothing like that. It was you pay. If you're not paying, you're out of here. So within the span of a month, I'm off small group leading, which I'd been doing for years. I had a bunch of group of guys that now I'm not allowed to meet with as a part of the church. And then serving faithfully for years on the prayer team, not allowed to do, all in the span of 1 month. So back to the prayer team stuff. So I had the one call with the guy, and not in person. He didn't meet with me in person ever. And then it was real short. We didn't get anywhere. And then that next week, I kept texting him and saying, hey, when can we actually meet up? When can we talk on the phone again? Nothing. He ghosted me. So on prayer team, again, no path to redemption. They had no intention of ever putting me back on anything. I was being cast aside. On top of that, I got blamed for what a girl was doing to me. It makes no sense to me that a girl can walk into that church, make up any accusation, and without question, that person is kicked off everything, assigned somebody who's not even going to follow up with them, and they're just abandoned. This church prides itself on justice. It prides itself on being all these things. So now looking back at their values, where's the forgiveness? It's not optional, they say. We love mercy, so we show mercy. Where was the mercy in our situation? If it was really a big deal about tithing and they had gone about it a different way and said, hey, we need you to be tithing within the next 3 months or you're not allowed to lead anymore, I would have listened to that. I would have been receptive to some gentle correction. This is something that we have to enforce. That's fine. Authenticity. We don't do fake. They were not honest why they were kicking me off prayer team. They made it sound like it was a podcast issue, even though I hadn't said anything that was bad. They wouldn't give me clips. They wouldn't allow me to delete it so I could stay on. Nothing. They were not honest about why. Trust. Lean into awkward. Why didn't they tell me the truth about why they were kicking me off? Was it too awkward? You're supposed to lean into it. Communication. Again, nobody talked to each other. They didn't communicate with us. No road to redemption. None of these things were being practiced. And that's their big platform. The other thing, too, I don't pay tithes, so I'm not allowed to lead anything. I'm not allowed to serve. I'm not allowed to. Why should I pay tithe to a church that will not protect me when I hand them legal documentation on paper? I don't show a fake screenshot. I hand them a protective order saying I'm not allowed to be around this person. They're not allowed to contact me, my place of employment. They won't even look at it. And they're defending the person harassing me. Where's the trust? Where's the leaning into awkward? And I'm supposed to pay tithe to a church that will cast me aside at the first false accusation without even asking my side of the story, without being honest about why they're doing this or anything. Where are the values being upheld here in this church? Where? And I'm supposed to give you guys money. Why? You don't defend me when real stuff's going down. Real crimes are being committed against me. So it was at this point in this story that I decided, look, this church isn't going to protect me. They're not trying to cover me or protect me from this person who's been harassing me for a couple of years. I'm not allowed to serve. I don't feel safe anymore. I'm leaving. So I switched churches. I'm at a new church now, which is fantastic, and I really get to thrive there. How do I know that my stalker was the one that got me in trouble? Where's my proof? Immediately after that, my stalker had bragged about how I got kicked out of church. Even though I wasn't kicked out, I left. I switched of my own volition. I did get kicked off of the stuff I was doing to serve there. But she started bragging about how I got kicked out and I got what I deserved and this is what I get. When I finally got my stalker served and we made a change, I decided to message the person that fired me from all the stuff I was doing on the prayer team. I emailed her. I still had her email address, which worked. And I said, "Hello, this is Caleb. If you recall, you and so-and-so, the other guy that was in that meeting, sat me down during the summer of 2023 and told me I was no longer a prayer team leader. I told them my intention for writing this was to do two things. One, to gain healing on my own end, because I was still pretty upset about it, and so that they might not do this again to someone else. I called them out on not being honest with me about why they kicked me off the prayer team. And I told her I knew why, because my stalker was bragging about it and bragging about it on her social media and in her personal messages to me. And I told them I'm very disappointed that a church that preaches about leaning into awkward would not be upfront about their intentions or address allegations that were made against me. What makes this even worse is the same exact person is who I have a restraining order against. I tried to show you in that meeting the paperwork, but you did not take the time to read them, and even went as far as to blame me for someone else's behavior. I'm also very disappointed that the person who they assigned to work with me never met with me in person and did not respond back to me after our first phone call together. No one from Mercy Culture staff or anyone else on the team has reached out to see how I was doing. I don't believe you ever intended to give me a chance to redeem myself or to serve again. It was very hard because I served faithfully for years and was immediately tossed aside for something I didn't do. And even then, what I did was never made clear. I'm at a new church now. The same person has tried to call them and do the same thing, but they hold a higher standard of accountability. I am flourishing there. I write this to encourage you to be better. Take this as a learning experience. You have failed in this area as a leader. It is a horrible thing to know that someone can walk into Mercy Culture, make up any lie, and wrongful action is taken and people are blindly punished. How can you preach justice when you will not support someone who is a victim of stalking and has all the evidence to prove it? I posted several videos online detailing my experience as a victim of stalking. This last part coming soon will address Mercy Culture. I have chosen to use Mercy Culture's name. I will also be making another video later expanding on the subject of church hurt, which I'm doing now. I will not name specific pastors. I really hope you take this opportunity to grow as a leader and the church's accountability as a whole improves as a result of this. Best regards. I sent that. I wasn't sure if the email was good or not. I wasn't sure if it was going to work or anything, but lo and behold, a couple hours later, I got something back, and it was pretty long. I'm going to read this to you verbatim, and I'm going to tell you my thoughts on it. She says, "Hey, Caleb, I'm so thankful to receive this email. To be honest, although I'm not happy you've been hurt along the way at all, but for sure can see how this whole situation hurt you. I'm thankful you were able to reach out and share your heart. I first and foremost want to say I apologize for how things happened. I would like to respond to everything that hurt you, but that would be best outside of an email." That's fair. She's offering to talk, not an email. "My heart wasn't to be a judge in all of what came up, but to make sure we're on the same page. It may not have come up the best, and again, I apologize for that. I did hope that you and so would connect. I didn't know how that went and thought he didn't hear back from you when he reached out. I could have done a better job checking in. I am slightly aware, but I haven't gotten involved, in quotes, that the situation with that person has been unresolved, and I am sorry it's been so terrible. I don't know any of the details, and I pray God does bring justice and clears up all the lies from the enemy and the accuser. I'm so glad you're in a good church. My heart always and forever will be that you're loving Jesus. I know this response didn't speak into everything you noted. I'm willing to speak via phone if needed. If not, I do again apologize and ask for your forgiveness and pray for your heart and reconciliation. Again, thankful you're in a good church. I do look to grow in loving and leading better. Blessings." So not the worst response. She didn't deny. She didn't deflect. She tried to address the best she could. But here's what you didn't hear. She didn't deny lying about why they took me off everything. And she even addressed that we are aware of this person and it hasn't been resolved yet. But again, when she says, I haven't gotten involved, why? Why aren't you advocating for people that she's actively trying to hurt? This isn't the first time she's done this. She's done this to other people. And again, you chose to take the hands-off approach, right? Why aren't you trying to get to the bottom of it and clear things up so that this person doesn't do this again? Can you even name the people that are trying to handle the situation? And I'm using the word handle very loosely because I know y'all have taken the let's just not touch it at all approach. Let's just wait and see. Let's just ignore it and see if it goes away, right? But again, she does not try to say, no, we were honest. It was about the podcast. She all but admits we took you off and didn't tell you why. She basically says, yes, that is what happened without saying the words. So where's the authenticity? Where's that leadership standard? If I'm held to this super high standard of you're not paying your taxes, you're kicked off of everything, Why aren't you held to any sort of standards on authenticity, about being genuine, about being able to trust you and to lean into awkward? So it's okay for you to violate that, but if you're not paying up, then you're not under our protection. We don't care about you. Does that rub right with anybody else here at all? Does that set off any warning flags at all? Or is it just me? That's pretty much the story, guys. I left that church. I never came back. There's a bunch of other stuff that I wanted to talk about with some other people, but for the most part, that's my mindless rant on why Mercy Culture Church is not a good church. They rotate all their staff. You don't know who's who. You don't know who works there. You don't know who's in charge of you. When you hear from somebody who's in charge of you, you're probably going to get in trouble. If you're looking for protection from people that are harassing you, stalking you, potentially trying to hurt you, don't look at Mercy Culture because they're probably not going to help you. I'm not saying churches are bad. And again, I'm totally not against giving. I give money to the church. I do. I'm not saying all churches are bad. Just that one's not good. They preach all this stuff that they're not willing to, one, hold themselves accountable for, and two, they let anybody come in there and make up whatever they want to say, and they just take that person's word. And that's not a safe environment you can grow in. That's not a safe environment for you to pursue the Lord in. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I am in a good church now that I trust, and that my stalker has tried to get me in trouble there. She has reached out to my family and tried to harass my siblings, my parents, my wife. She's done all that. But that church isn't having it because they actually have accountability and they actually lead and they actually take care of their people. Mercy Culture Church, though, I think needs to be skipped over if you're looking for a new church. I would highly advise you don't go there. But that's all I can say. If they do things for you, then great. Anyway, guys, that's kind of it. I hope it was at least somewhat engaging. I'm going to leave comments on, so I'm kind of curious to know what y'all think about it. If you agree or disagree, or did you have a different experience? I want to hear it. So appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys next time.